Hi friends, welcome back to Gaming with Amy. I hope you're all doing well. Like most people, I have a lot of interests and hobbies aside from gaming. I'm a guitarist, movie lover, and avid reader, and today's video is going to reflect that last point. I contain multitudes, okay? Don't box me into a corner. To me, there's nothing better than finding a book that speaks to you, whether that has to do with the genre, topic, tone, or writing style. Personally speaking, I find books that resonate with me the most have this unspoken vibe. Sorry, I know that word gets thrown around a lot these days, but it's quite frankly true for me. Generally speaking, I'm typically drawn toward anything weird, creepy, and off-putting. Basically, if the book exists within the uncanny valley, sign me up. I also enjoy memoirs, and obviously anything music related. Most of what I've read recently fits in those categories, and I'd love to share them with you. And one tiny thing before we get started, I'd appreciate it if you could like this video, and if you're feeling up to it, go ahead and subscribe if you enjoy content on books and cozy gaming. Paradise Rot, Jenny Hval. Starting off the list is Jenny Hval's Paradise Rot. This is her first novel, and it's quite a unique reading experience. It follows Jo, a Norwegian biology student, off to study at a university in Australia. In an attempt to find more stable housing than the local hostel, Jo is put into contact with Carol, an eccentric woman who's slightly older than her. Carol lives in a renovated brewery with no walls and thus no privacy. But the price is right, so Jo moves in. Soon thereafter, Jo and Carol's relationship turns romantic, and in a surreal, confusing, and disgusting sort of way. Let's just say there are a lot of descriptions of bodily fluids. Ultimately, Paradise Rot is about exploring one's sexuality as a young person, as well as the confusion that can come along with it. I thought Hval did so in such a unique way, all through a psychological horror lens. And what I found most interesting about the novel is the fine line of what was real and what wasn't. Fever dream is an apt description of the book, especially toward the end, and I highly recommend it. Down the Drain, Julia Fox. If you didn't already know, Julia Fox is an actress who's most well known for her role as Adam Sandler's mistress in the 2019 film Uncut Gems. But before she snagged that role, she lived a completely different and almost unbelievable life. Most of this was shared in her recent memoir, Down the Drain. In it, Fox shares the nitty-gritty of her tumultuous family life, rocky and sometimes dangerous relationships, and the many wild situations she's gotten herself in. I had such a great time with this book. I'm a sucker for a celebrity memoir, and I generally like Julia Fox as a personality. It's harrowing, engrossing, and incredibly well-written. And I recommend listening to this one on audiobook, since Fox reads it herself. The New Seoul Park Jelly Massacre, Yeeun. I have to admit that I first became interested in the New Seoul Park Jelly Massacre because of the stunning cover and overall book design. And luckily, the book itself is very good too. The New Seoul Park Jelly Massacre by Yeeun is exactly what it sounds like. A mysterious vendor at the New Seoul amusement park is handing out sample packets of jelly candy for visitors to try. The thing is, the jelly isn't just a sugary treat. People who ingest it devolve into madness and something much, much worse than you can ever imagine. I don't want to spoil anything, so I'll just leave the synopsis at that. The first depiction of body horror honestly had my stomach churning. It takes a lot to scare and revolt me, so I think that's really saying something about the writing in this book. I also appreciated how the story unfolded. Each chapter was from the perspective of someone who was at the park when the massacre happened, a victim of the massacre, or someone related to the massacre in another way. It's quite haunting and sad, and an interesting critique on capitalism. Rebel Girl, My Life as a Feminist Punk, Kathleen Hanna. If you're a 90s music nerd like me, I'm sure you've probably heard of Kathleen Hanna. In case you haven't, she's the iconic singer of Bikini Kill and arguably the name most associated with the Riot Grrrl movement. In her memoir, Rebel Girl, My Life as a Feminist Punk, Hannah's story begins at her lower middle class upbringing, living with an abusive father. She shares tales and anecdotes from her college years leading up to her time with La Tigra and the period in her life living with a chronic illness. Hannah's memoir does not disappoint. If you're a punk fan or just a music fan in general, I think you'd love this. I also liked how most of the chapters are short and concise. You get a little bite or anecdote from Hanna. She says so much without saying too much, which I think is incredibly hard to do. Absorbed, Kylie Whitehead. Another standout for me recently is Absorbed by Kylie Whitehead. All that you really need to know about this shocking novel is that it's about a woman who is concerned about the future of her relationship and spontaneously absorbs her boyfriend in an effort to keep him closer than ever. While the premise sounds silly, the story itself is actually quite layered and contemplative. Of course, any good fiction with a bonkers premise like this is actually a vehicle for something much deeper. At its core, Absorbed is about a deeply insecure woman who doesn't have a sense of self. The only part of herself that she can identify is the person she is in her rocky at best relationship. The novel explores these themes in interesting ways, and it has you reflecting on your own insecurities as you read it. I'd say that's a pretty damn effective piece of literature. The September House, Carissa Orlando. The final book I'd like to share is The September House by Carissa Orlando, a super fresh take on the classic haunted house tale. The story follows Margaret, a middle-aged woman who, with her husband Hal, has finally saved enough money to purchase the charming and full-of-character Victorian home of their dreams. But it turns out that the house is full of much more than character whenever September rolls around. But Margaret doesn't mind. She can deal with a few ghosts and blood dripping down the walls. That is until her daughter becomes worried about Hal and insists on making a trip to their home, unfortunately during September. I was actually taken by surprise by The September House. I ended up listening to the audiobook, and the narrator did such an excellent job in bringing the story to life. What I really loved about this is the main character and how she just accepted that her house was crawling with ghouls because, hey, at least she had a house. I felt as though this was an apt allegory for the way things are going these days, economically speaking. Most people can't afford a house, myself included, and we will accept anything so long as we have a roof over our heads, bleeding walls and all. So there you have it, folks. Is there anything on this list that you're interested in? Let me know in the comments. And of course, if you have any recommendations for me, I'd love to hear them. Thanks again for watching, and I'll talk to you again soon.